Now, without any further delay, I would like to turn today's Academy Live session over to our first presenter. Joel, you have the floor.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on Migrating to SQL Server 2008. I work with the Microsoft Corporation and specifically with the SQL Server product team focused on migration. I'm also joined today by one of our key partners for migration, DB Best Technologies, and their CEO, Dimitri Balin. Thanks for joining us again. I'm excited to talk to you guys about migrating to SQL Server 2008. We're going to start off today's session by looking at some of the polls for the people who are participating in the session. Please fill out the poll and let us know where you're joining us from today. We'd like to know who's engaged in our Academy Live presentation and capture a little input from you guys who are joining us. You can see the majority so far today. We have 18 of the attendees from the U.S. and Canada. We do have one person from APAC and India, and we also look like we have several people from UK, France, and Germany. If you're a Microsoft employee, please let us know your job role. This helps us ensure we're targeting the right messaging to you guys, not only in this session, but in future sessions. Looks like we have several SSPs, several TSPs. It's great to have you guys today. You folks on the line who are TSPs, we will be going through a technical demo, so this should help you guys in any migration opportunity that you might have with customers. We also have an ATS, a partner TSP, which is great to see, as well as developers and several others. So thanks for sharing your job role with us. For those of you that are partners on the line, can you please let us know what your specific job role is? Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Looks like we have several architects. We have one implementer, a couple of developers. Data seems to be changing as I'm speaking, so but we have some support partners, some marketing folks, and some pre-sales folks as well. So again, thanks for joining us today. Well, let's jump in and talk about our objectives for today's session. We really want to start by grounding the conversation in why the focus on migration and talk about, head-on some of the challenges that are typically faced with regards to migrations, whether they be from a sales perspective or also from a technical implementation perspective. We also want to talk a little bit again in more of a grounding note around the value that SQL Server 2008 can provide. This is super important for us to really make sure that we articulate this to you guys as our internal folks from Microsoft as well as our partners to help sell the value proposition of SQL Server 2008 with regards to migration. We also want to make sure we're helping you guys identify and activate those migration opportunities that may be in some of those key accounts that you work with. And then we'll have a big section on doing that today in our presentation. From there, we want to spend the majority of the session on actually showing you guys how to technically implement a migration to SQL Server 2008, and Dimitri Balin from DB Best Technologies will be demoing our SQL Server Migration Assistant tool for Oracle and showing you guys firsthand what it takes to actually do an assessment and migrate an Oracle database to SQL Server. Finally, we'd like to really make it real for you guys and show you some of the best practices that are implemented as well as some specific customer examples on completing a migration to SQL Server. So why the focus on migration? Well, for us, it's a really important part of our business, one. And two, it's really starting to be noticed, not just within Microsoft, but with key analysts and key market professionals, that migrations to SQL Server are definitely a viable way for customers to, one, save money, improve their total cost of ownership, and really enhance business productivity. And you can see from the top quote here that recently Noel Johanna, a analyst from Forrester, said that 60 to 65% of customers who are migrating from Oracle are migrating because of cost. And this is just a snapshot of what we're seeing. We see this starting to be a really important trend for Microsoft and SQL Server to drive customers to our platform from existing data platforms that they're on today to help them save costs and increase their business productivity. We also see this internally. We know for a fact and have data that shows that when customers do migrate from SQL Server, typically they migrate from Oracle or MySQL. And we also have our SQL Server Migration Assistant tools, which we're going to be demoing today, but we're seeing a tremendous pickup in the amount of downloads that those are getting. So if you have not downloaded those tools, I strongly recommend you do that as a starting point, and we'll be talking more about that throughout this presentation. But that said, we know that migrations are a challenge. They're not easy. They're not something that you can just, walk up to and have flip the switch and have happen seamlessly. We know that they typically have long sales cycles. They do take a lot of convincing the customer to move their existing data platform for several reasons. A lot of times they have a good trained staff that's working that data platform. They have a viable line of business application that they would have to either maybe take down or determine how to best move over. So there's some things that have to be navigated, and we'll talk to you guys today in today's session around how some of the tools can help you at least make that proposition a little bit less a barrier for you with customers. We also know that pre-sale support is really critical here because you have to understand the various technologies that you're migrating from as well as the technologies that you're migrating to. And so part of the resources that we want to make sure you guys have access to are some of these pre-sales resources that can help you in that endeavor. We also know that once that new system is up and running on SQL, we need to give that customer a lot of post-deployment support to make sure that that new system and that new data platform is highly performant for them. And we also know that you need a good set of tools such as SSMA and comprehensive technical resources that span the database as well as the applications in order to really build customer confidence in our ability to execute the migration as well as reduce their risk and their cost around making the actual move. So there's some things that we put in place to help with some of these challenges, and we really want to talk to you guys about those today. Up on SQL Server, up on Microsoft.com/SQL Server, we have a new Migration Solution Center that you can visit that basically walks through a process, a step-by-step process for customers to, one, learn about the product, start pulling together some of the information and actually putting some planning around the migration, then actually executing the migration, and then some of the post-migration activities. So we're starting to publish and really promote a process for a successful migration, and I encourage you to check that out. We also really highly recommend customers and even our field work closely with partners on migrations. And that's a big part of why we have BB Best Technologies here, is to demonstrate to you guys firsthand the importance of working with partners. And Dimitri can explain to you guys a little bit more about some of the capabilities that partners bring to the table to help with regards to migration. Tools, as I mentioned, the SQL Server Migration Assistant, I strongly encourage you guys to download those. We have one for Oracle, we have one for Sybase, we have one for Access, and we also have an analyzer for Power Builder. It doesn't do any of the conversion, but it helps analyze Power Builder code and what it would take to convert that to .NET. And finally, we have some help support resources for you guys to look at. So with those challenges, we want to talk about the product a little bit first and then go into identifying some of the opportunities. So why should customers consider migrating to SQL Server, especially SQL Server 2008? Well, we inferred it a little bit earlier, but really it's about total cost of ownership. From SQL Server 2005 to 2008, we announced no price increases, and we really feel that, and have quantitative and qualitative data and research that proves this out, that the TCO value for SQL Server is tremendous. And over time, customers can really derive the value from their data platform by being on top of SQL Server 2008. You couple this with the fact that SQL Server 2008 is truly an enterprise data platform. We have benefits and capabilities in security, performance, BI, data warehousing, policy management, many enhancements in SQL Server 2008 that truly bring it to a level of enterprise class. Couple this with the fact that SQL Server 2008 has a very rich set of features and functionalities that we've gone through and compared with some of our key competitors. And I won't go through it in detail, but I do want to reference the links in the presentation here that are also available up on our Migration Solution Center that can show you guys how SQL Server 2008 compares with some of our key competitors such as Oracle, IBM, MySQL. We even have some information on Sybase. So I strongly encourage you, if you're questioning or wondering how different capabilities and different features of SQL Server 2008 compare to that of our competitors, check it out. And we have some unbiased analyst views up there around the progress of SQL Server 2008 compared to some of those other data platforms. So you take the total cost of ownership, you take the quality of the enterprise data platform, you take our rich set of features and functionality, and then also include our high security and compliance capabilities, and you really have a valued package for SQL Server 2008 that can tell a very compelling story to customers on why they should migrate to us just from a product standpoint. So when I'm out there and I'm working with customers, how do I spot and activate some of those migration opportunities? Because they are there. You can see on the right-hand side that we know that 90% of all all enterprise customers are running multiple database products. So pretty much any enterprise level account that you're working with is going to have a heterogeneous environment, which could potentially be a target for us to migrate to SQL Server. But when we really started looking at this, we said we needed to bucketize it. So we bucketized it into kind of two main scenarios that we typically see on where migrations can happen or migration opportunities can be identified. And the first was really around just pure budgetary or vendor satisfaction. And today in the economic climate, we know for a fact, and everybody's well aware, but it's definitely worth mentioning that cost cutting is huge. And IT is really getting hit specifically with any new product, any new projects that don't show a very immediate ROI. And so some of the things that we like to be able to prove out is that by moving to SQL Server, customers are ready and willing and able to get a demonstrative ROI on their move to SQL Server. So one of the questions that we think about to activate that with customers is starting to ask them, how much does their current database environment cost? How much less could it cost on SQL Server 2008? And then let them leverage some of our cost analysis tools that we have to help them determine the ROI on making such a move. This really opens up a lot of eyes and ears with regards to IT departments when they can see firsthand the money that they'd be saving on SQL Server, especially when you start factoring in maintenance fees, etc. And we have a good example of a best practice on how that happened later on in the slide. We also know that many companies have a standard list on which they buy software. And there's two typical scenarios that we see here. One, SQL's on that price list or on that standards list, or 2, we're not. And so the thing that we'd like to be able to do is minimally get on their price list or get on their standards list so we can become a viable option for them to purchase. So getting SQL on their price list, we ask questions such as, have you considered adding SQL Server to influence the costs of the other database products that you're buying today? Because it is a valuable tool for customers to be able to reference the fact that SQL Server is on their standards list to help drive down the cost that they may be spending on other data platforms. But if we are on their standards list, we'd like to push the fact that we have, opportunities for them to cut costs by moving their existing databases over to SQL. So talk about standardization, consolidation, some of the key value triggers, budgetary triggers that would help influence moving over to SQL Server 2008. Finally, on the left-hand side, we see a lot of vendor satisfaction issues. So customers that just have current dissat or dissatisfaction, whether it be through performance, support, maybe it's the maintenance cost, some of the key things that they use to evaluate their satisfaction levels with vendors. And a lot of customers get to a point where they're fed up and are considering a move just based on their satisfaction. So some questions we've posed that can be used to activate those include, are you fully satisfied with your existing database vendor? Do they compete for your business? Do they provide you a very high quality level of support? And with the product set that we have in our really, truly important partner ecosystem, we feel Microsoft and SQL Server definitely provide those things. So outside of the budgetary vendor set, we also are seeing a lot of stuff with regards to ecosystem. So I already mentioned the heterogeneous environments, and here's where standardization and consolidation also play a role. But also there's times when there's application or hardware/infrastructure upgrade, and these are times when really customers start to question and scrutinize the value of their underlying data platform when they're thinking about making application upgrades or doing hardware upgrades. So if you see any of those, you can definitely start asking them if their data platform can scale, can it meet the enterprise type capabilities that they may be looking for, does it have the BI, does it have the security and the compliance features, some of the things that we referenced about the value of SQL Server 2008. Finally, we see product support being a great time to actually start activating a migration scenario, whether that be a product coming to its end of life, or whether it be the customer is just thinking about making a new investment based on their support contract and the timings of their support contract. So these are some things to think about when you're in customers and you're really wondering where and when to activate a migration opportunity. And from there, I want to introduce Dimitri Balin, again, CEO of DB Best Technologies, and Dimitri's going to share with you guys more of the technical aspects of completing a migration to SQL Server 2008. Dimitri?
Thank you, Joe. So hello, everyone. This is Dimitri Balin. I'm with DB Best. Just a couple of words about us. We actually developed the original migration product, the migration tool. Microsoft acquired it back in 2005, and that was the basis for the SSMA. So we've been developing and supporting the versions of SSMA for the last few years. I was at Microsoft in the SQL Server product group, and so I left last year to go back to DB Best and to focus more on delivering the services and actually migrating customers to SQL Server, both the end customers and the ISVs, the partners. So let's talk about the migrations from the technical standpoint. You go to a customer. You most likely going to see two types of applications: custom written apps and the packaged apps. Custom written, that's kind of one of a kind. This is banks, financial companies, insurance companies, healthcare. They do tend to develop certain applications just for themselves. So they own the code. They know how to make changes to this code. Sometimes these are legacy applications, and so they're kind of in the maintenance mode, and at some point they just wait to be upgraded or migrated or re-engineered or re-architected. and that's a very good opportunity for you to step in and to do the migration. And if it's a packaged app, typical examples are SAP or Siebel or PeopleSoft or Amdocs, Red Prairie. There's a whole bunch of applications that run on both Oracle and Sybase and SQL Server. So in that case, it's not enough to just to talk to the customer, to the end customer. Let's move it over to SQL Server. You would need to talk to the ISV that develops this app or maintains, supports this app, whether they have a version of this application, of this product running on SQL Server. If they do, then to work with them to come up with a script how to do this step, this migration process. And if they don't, to work with them maybe to help really importing their product to run on SQL. And there's a whole bunch of examples of Microsoft and partners and us doing that. There's a lot of people in the DTE organization who've been focusing on doing exactly that. So again, you get to the customer. What do you do? What do you do as a first step? And Joe identified these scenarios: the application upgrade or the hardware upgrade or the end of the product support lifecycle. I think these are very key points where you can offer customers to migrate, to switch to SQL Server. So the first step is kind of, let's do assessment. Customers ask, so what are the benefits of SQL Server 2008? And you can clearly outline those. And then the next step, well, let's say they are convinced, yes, it's worth considering to move to SQL. Really, what would it take to do this move? Now, let me share you a questionnaire we usually ask customers to fill out. So it gives an idea about what it takes, rough idea. What would be the scope of a typical migration project? It's a questionnaire. It's about 20 or so questions. Some of the key questions there are really the how many objects to convert, and what type of client API is used, what language is the client application written in, and whether the front end, whether the application is going to remain as is, or it's going to be rewritten. Let's say from Oracle Forms to Windows Forms, or to .NET. So to let's say to send this questionnaire to a customer, or any questionnaire, any form, and to ask these questions, there are a couple of things. One is you get a much better scope of what's going on and what to expect. And the other thing, the customer also would get a better understanding of what they've got and what to expect when doing the migration. So for example, if they do have certain scripts, Unix, Windows scripts or jobs, interfacing or working with this specific application that they consider to migrate, they need to understand that these scripts would also need to be moved. And that's, let's say, a good opportunity to introduce SQL Server integration services. Okay, so I'll just go back to the slide. So the assessment, that's kind of the questionnaire, that's important. And then the other thing is really the SSMA, the SQL Server Migration Assistant as a tool. It's a free tool, free download. As Joe mentioned, there are 4 SSMAs exist out there: Oracle, Sybase, Access, Power Builder. Each one of the tools consists of a number of modules. I'm going to do some quick overview of that. But as a next step, you can ask customer to run a Migration Analyzer module of SSMA. Migration Analyzer connects to the database, goes through all the objects. At the end, comes back with the report saying to convert this specific Oracle or Sybase database, it's going to take 385 hours of manual work. All the rest is going to be done by the tool. or it may come back saying, well, it's going to be 5 hours only, because it's fairly simple or fairly straightforward migration. So that's for the assessment, and then I'll just go through the process, through the steps a little bit later on. But one of the maybe messages is based on the past experience that you may want to consider introducing an SI who has a migration practice, who's done it before. That's to really make sure that the customer is happy with the Microsoft products and with the whole process of migration. There are certain techniques that either DBBS or other partners developed across the years to really to demonstrate how to do that properly, fast, reliable, and professional. So the tool, the SSMA. We divided the entire migration process in a number of steps. And then each one of the modules in SSMAs, they try to address different steps in the migration process. The first step, Migration Analyzer, helps with the assessment of the migration project. The step of converting the schema and the business logic. So the tables, store procedures, triggers, packages, views, functions, sequences, all that schema part, that's going to be taken care of by the schema converter. Then the third step, the data migration. So there is a module called Data Migrator. One of the most popular questions is how does SSMA Data Migrator differ from SSIS? And the answer is that SSIS has many more features beyond migrations, much more flexible, much more powerful. SSMA Data Migrator is good for migrations. You can just connect to the database, select the tables you want to move the data for, and just with a few clicks, you have the data being moved over to SQL Server. So it's much faster to do that rather than go through the creating of the package in SSIS. And then the migration tester, the fourth step. So at the point where the database have been converted using first SSMA and then completing the conversion manually, you're going to have two databases, one in Oracle or Sybase and the converted SQL Server database. Now, the very natural question is, how do we make sure that these two databases are the same? And so the testing piece, that's a fairly significant component of the entire migration process. And so to do this testing, at least at the unit test level, you would rather have some tools. That's the purpose of Migration Tester. It allows you to select the store procedures or the functions, the package procedures you want to test, and run them side by side in Oracle and SQL Server or Sybase and SQL Server on the same data set. Then it compares the results. The results mean both the output parameters and the changes in the database, and then comes back with the report. So that's kind of the way for users to reduce the testing time. That's the idea. The steps of converting the application or making changes in the application and the overall deployment and integration, these are still primarily manual steps, although the SSMA for Power Builder started addressing the conversion of application tasks. So the Power Builder analyzer connects to Power Builder, scans the source code, identifies all embedded SQL statements, and these are Sybase SQL statements, and then comes back with the report saying, well, let's say there is 97 embedded SQL statements in these Power Builder modules. And that's what it would take to make them Transact SQL or SQL Server compatible. That's the idea. And in the roadmap, there are some plans to introduce further products, but it's up to the SQL Server product group to drive that roadmap. All right, so let me demonstrate to you how SSMA looks like, and for those of you who don't know. I'll go back to sharing my desktop, and I'm going to start SSMA on my local machine. So SSMA, as I said, it's a free tool. It's a desktop product. You don't have to run it on Oracle machine or on SQL Server. It connects to Oracle or Sybase or Access and to SQL pretty much remotely as a client. And then SSMA can operate in two modes. One, using a connection to the live database, and then the other one, you can save a project, similar to the concept of a Visual Studio project. So I'm going to open an existing project that was saved before. And this is for one of the customers we've been working with through Microsoft Migration Center of Excellence. Now, the idea is that we can see the Oracle Metadata Explorer on the left-hand side, and the SQL Server Metadata Explorer on the lower part of the screen. And I can browse the databases or the objects in Oracle or in SQL. Now, I'm not connected to either one of the databases, but all the metadata have been stored in this project file. Just a few comments. Some of the people have asked before whether this metadata is secure, and the answer is yes. We went through multiple security reviews when developing these products, security reviews for Microsoft. So the information there is secured. Also, there is no information about there's no data being stored in there. It's just the metadata. It's just definitions of objects. So as a simple step, I can select a table in Oracle, click on Convert Schema. Yeah, and since I already have saved it before, so I'm going to click on Overwrite All, and I'm going to get the converted SQL Server code. In this case, it's fairly straightforward. I can look at the SQL itself. So I can see the create table statement, and I can do the same task. I can do the same step for other objects, like procedures, for example, store procedures. So I can pick up a store procedure. Again, click on Convert Schema, and the product, the SSMA, will start working on converting this object. At the end, it will come back with the converted code. The problems, the errors, I will be able to see in the tab of error list. So I will be able to go through the errors and warnings and see what could be wrong in there. So that gives kind of an environment to work on all the objects to migrate. So that's the very basic feature of converting the object. Let me show you how the create report looks like. So if you remember when I started describing the migration process, the first step is usually the assessment. And so the question is, how do you do that? Once you connect it to Oracle, you can select the schema or the database or all the schemas in this database and click on Create Report. I'm not going to do that right now since it takes some time to process these results, but at the end, here's how the report is going to look like. And this is a report that I ran before on the same database. So this is the database. It's going to give me some statistics saying how many statements were there and how many of these statements actually failed during the conversion. Failed in the sense of the SSMA wasn't able to convert them automatically. The important number here to look at is the total estimated manual conversion time. And in this case, it says 695 hours. So the way that it's been calculated is it's an aggregation of estimates for every single object, for every table, store proc, package procedure, function, etc. How do we get to the number for each object? We come up with a number with an estimate for every statement. So for every, let's say, variable declaration statement, or for every select statement, insert, update, etc. We do have an estimate of what it will take to convert that statement manually, and then for all these objects, for all these statements that fail, that SSMA fails to convert, we aggregate these numbers and come up with the total number for the entire schema. And then the way to work with this report is really to, let's say, go through the procedures and see what might be wrong with the converted object. So I can, it's actually, for those of you who remember the earlier versions of SSMA, we used to have what we call the zebra features. The zebra allowed us to click on the source statement and see the corresponding target statement, converted statement. That's pretty much now implemented within the assessment report. So I can click on the source code and see how it's going to be converted in SQL Server. So here is an example. So I can go through the error messages, go to the click on the next problem, and it's going to bring me to the next message or warning or error message within the converted code. Or you can see at the bottom of the window, there is a whole bunch of error messages. I can go through some of them, all of them, and they would just, if I click there, it brings me to that object where that error message happened. So the assessment report, it's kind of a fairly, it's actually, it's a lot of XML files that contain the information about the metadata, and then really serve as a very deep technical assessment of what's in the database. A couple of caveats, a couple of points for you to consider. The number, this, let's say, X hours to convert, it's a reasonable number. The biggest challenge with this number sometimes is that, let's say you've got a problem, a certain statement that SSMA wasn't able to convert. And the SSMA thinks, let's say, it's going to take manually to convert 10 minutes. But if you've got thousands of statements like this, or very similar statements, it's still going to think that every one of these statements is going to be 10 minutes to convert. Whereas actually in real life, once you convert the first few, all the rest is going to be converted much faster. So one of the kind of ideas, one of the approaches is to do some kind of post-processing of these assessment results, or better understanding or analyzing of these assessment results. And that's I think one of the areas where the product group and partners can help with the analyzing these the assessments. All right, so that's about the analyzer. If I go back to the product, the number of features in the tool is fairly deep. It's fairly high, and so one of the important things for you to be aware of, many times there is a need to modify the type mappings. Type mappings, whether this is for the entire database or just for certain store procedures, just certain objects. And actually, SSMA, we invested a lot of resources in actually doing that. The tool is very flexible, so you can do that for, like as I said, on the schema level, on the objects level, for just selected objects, etc. And so then you can decide whether, let's say, for just one of the most popular examples, the number or numeric data types in Oracle, they by default get converted to float 53 in SQL Server, and that's the correct conversion. But what happens is that people, those who work on the project, sometimes don't realize that that's going to happen, and so they don't like float 53, or they don't expect the actual data to be of such precision. So they want to modify that, and so there is a way to do that, going through edit, etc. All right. Let me make a few more points about the overall migration process. And here I wanted to show you some of the kind of best practices, how we usually approach migrations. So here is an example of a customer, fairly typical migration assessment analysis that goes beyond database migration. To move the database, that's all great and nice, but that's not enough. You need to do some other things. What are these other steps? To make changes in the application, to convert scripts, integrate with other products, third-party apps, etc. So that becomes kind of a full scope of a typical migration project, of these steps. And that's what and then my following slides just demonstrate this is how we approach each one of these steps. So for the database migration, for the application conversion, say if it's a Visual Basic code or Java code or C++ code, whether it's really just to take this application, make changes in the embedded SQL statements, and then recompile and point to SQL Server, or would it include also rewriting the, let's say, from Power Builder to .NET, or from Java to .NET, when the conversion is going to be much more complex then. The same for the scripts. Do you take the existing, say, Perl or Corn Shell or any shell script, do you run them under services for Unix, or do you rewrite them to, let's say, SSIS or Informatica maybe? So these are the steps, let's say, for data migration. Do you create a package in SSIS and do the one-time move, or do you use SSMA for this purpose, or the downtime that the customer would allow you, it's going to be fairly low, fairly small, and you just can't do just one full move. So you need to do either full and delta, or you need to do some form of replication, whether this is Oracle to SQL replication or Sybase to SQL Server replication. So these are the steps. Yeah, and I can, I keep talking about that. We don't have, I guess, enough time for this. So going back to the slides, so I talked about the modules, the analyzer, the schema converter. That's how to convert the schema. The data migrator, when we very much improved the performance of data migration in the latest version of SSMA. It uses the non-logged operation, writes directly into the SQL Server without going through the disk, and the migration tester. And maybe kind of summary of the challenges, of the kind of points that you would be aware of for these type of migrations, Oracle Sybase Access. So for Oracle, I would very highly recommend to go for kind of low-hanging fruit for the simpler applications. So if you go to a customer and they've got, let's say, 20 different apps, and you want to sell them the APA, and you want to pick up the first one or two or three apps to convert, I would suggest to put off the Oracle Forms as the last as the last project. The easiest ones are the ones that either custom-written apps that use store procedures, or that have a lot of maybe embedded SQL, but still the embedded SQL statement is not too complex to convert using SSMA. You can just copy these statements, copy them into SSMA, convert, and paste the converted code back into the source code. Then there are some statements that just don't exist in SQL Server, or certain syntax structures, such as packages or package variables and collections. So there are some ways to work around that. SSMA tries to handle it somehow, but these are the syntax structures that are usually not very straightforward to convert. So you're going to spend some time doing that, and obviously that's going to increase the migration cost, and then maybe not to make the entire project not as appealing as it could be. For site-based migrations, it's usually very straightforward on the data, at least on the database side. So most of the databases I've seen, the SSMA was able to convert well over 95% of the code just right away. And the remaining conversion issues would be with the out-of joins or raise errors or print statements, or setting up the Sybase SQL Server replication. But these are, I would say, relatively minor compared to the challenges with Oracle migrations. With Access, so SSMA is not the only tool on the market that does the Access conversion, Access migrations. Well, you probably know that there is a upsizing wizard within the Access itself. And I think I delivered a couple of years ago a presentation just on how to upsize Access databases using SSMA. Just in a nutshell, there's three ways to do that. One, to use limited tables. The other one, to use ADPs, Access Data Projects. And then the third way, to rewrite to .NET. So SSMA handles the first one, to use linked tables, where you create tables in SQL Server, the data is being moved over to SQL, but the application, the front end, the forms, the reports, they remain the same, and they still would hit the JET engine. Then the JET would pass these queries over to SQL, and SQL would process these queries. The good thing is that the process is fairly straightforward. The downside, sometimes, not always, is the performance. So that's where the performance might not be that great, just because the SQL Server may not process these queries correctly, or it would have to bring the results back to Access, and these results, sometimes it's a whole raw data set. So that's where the slowdown might occur. The other thing about SSMA is that SSMA for Access is that it allows you to do network scan. So you can, if you go to a customer that has multiple Access databases spread across the organization in different file shares, so you can point to a number of file shares, and the SSMA will look for MDBs, all kind of Access files, and that will allow to come back with the full assessment report for multiple Access databases. The one thing that is still a challenge is to convert the queries, how to convert Access queries to work against the SQL Server. That's still something to be resolved. Right, so I'm going to hand it over back to Joe, and good luck with the migration.
Thanks, Dimitri. As you guys can see, the SQL Server migration assistance can really help reduce a lot of the effort. And while there are challenges, technically around converting everything in all scenarios, We really feel they can help you guys. So again, strongly recommend you download those. And we do have a lot of great customer evidence that talks to the value of the SSMA tools. And I won't go through this in the interest of time, but I do want you to realize that we take very seriously the feedback from customers around making the SSMA tools better and continually evolving them to meet the needs of not only our field and our partners, but also our customers. So you can see, you know, Simon & Schuster, Motorola, Sonata, who has used the SSMA tool, you know, to build out a lot of the, you know, opportunities for them as a partner, as well as Atento, have used SSMA to either help them save time, reduce a lot of the costs, you know, involved in doing a migration. One scenario that I do want to bring up, or one, you know, best practice, if you will, is really happened with our account teams at the Ford Motor Company. And initially, Ford was a long-term Oracle and Teradata customer. They had a seat on the Oracle advisory board. Really, Oracle was the primary data platform for all of their mission-critical apps. As you can see here on the slide, they had over 1,200 instances of Oracle running with over 2,500 you know, Oracle apps in production. Compare that to what was going on with SQL. We had a very small footprint and really weren't considered on any of their mission-critical applications. So our account team, and working very closely with partners such as DBBest, really took a holistic approach, and this is kind of the point of the presentation, is to make sure you guys leverage the available resources that we try to provide, whether they be technical or business focused, to help unlock the opportunity. So they took advantage of not only the product's capabilities, but also leveraging some of our proof of concept, you know, training centers. They leveraged, you know, our partnership with DBBest. We helped with the knowledge transfer, and ultimately, this, you know, removal of barriers resulted in some pretty significant results, not only for, you know, Microsoft, but also for, you know, Ford, in that, you know, they changed from Oracle being the standard to SQL being the standard. They saved over $10 million in maintenance fees alone in the first year. They were removed from the advisory board and really became a very referenceable customer for us. And we've worked with them over time, and key partners included, to migrate over 1,200 of those apps since the initiation of this you know, move to SQL, and really made a lot of money for SQL Server. So really wanted to share that best practice with you guys around taking advantage of the SSMA tools, working with partners, leveraging the content that's available up on our site, and really, you know, taking a holistic approach at driving a migration, because really that's what it takes. So our call to action is pretty simple, is really target and identify, you know, some of those opportunities that you see in your accounts. We talked about them earlier in the presentation on when there's some key scenarios that customers could be really thinking about a migration, and try to activate them using some of those questions. And then we also encourage that if you're not familiar, you haven't downloaded the SSMA tools, download them. They're free. The links are here in this slide. They're also throughout this presentation. Give them a walkthrough, make sure you understand them, and start thinking about them with regards to moving customers over to SQL Server, along with the other resources that we have. As an example, our Solution Center, you know, partners such as DBBest and other partners that can help with migrations as well. And we really thank you for your time today, and appreciate you joining us around migrating to SQL Server 2008. So with that, I will open it up for any final questions. We've held off questions until now, and I appreciate your patience. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to submit them now, and we will do our best to answer them or minimally get you pointed in the right direction.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you should see now is a web page. Please enter your email address to access the questions. Your feedback is very valuable to us, and we appreciate you taking a moment to fill out this survey before you log off. With that, I'd like to hand the floor back over to Joel for Q&A. Joel, you have the floor.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing a lot of questions come in that haven't been answered already. So If there are questions that you guys think of offline and you'd like to get back to myself or Dimitri, you definitely can. My email is Joel, Joelsh, at Microsoft.com, and Dimitri's email is Dimitri, Dmitry, at dbbest.com. And with that, again, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the audio portion of today's Academy Live session. All materials from today's presentation will be available at http://academy on this session's webpage. Partners can access the live meeting recording. Please see the recording URL in the Q&A pane. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters today, Joel and Dimitri, and thank you, audience, for logging in and joining us today.